When your success feels like a fraud, the hidden truth in your mind. Hey there, curious minds. Welcome back to this space where we love to break down the most complex ideas in the universe. Today we're going to do something special, a deep dive. A journey through 5 levels of understanding about a feeling that I bet you've felt at some point. We're talking about that moment, that specific moment when you land your dream job, get a standing ovation, or achieve a major goal, and an icy voice inside you whispers, "You don't deserve this. You're a fraud." And they're about to find out. And no, we're not staying on the surface. We're going deep because understanding this feeling isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It affects the brightest and most talented people, stealing the joy they've so rightfully earned. My promise to you is this: by the end of this journey, the way you view your own accomplishments and that critical voice in your head will have changed forever. Let's start at level 1, the surface of the known. The first thing we've all probably heard of is the famous Imposter Syndrome. Simply put, it's the persistent internal experience of feeling you're not as competent as others perceive you to be. It's a feeling of intellectual phoniness despite all external evidence. Your degrees, your results, your promotions, saying exactly the opposite. Another well-known aspect is the tendency to attribute your successes to luck. You think, well, I just got lucky this time, or they really helped me out, instead of accepting that your own effort and skill were the primary cause. In day-to-day life, this manifests in very curious ways. For example, you might fall into a cycle of procrastinating until the last minute, only to then work frantically. Why? Because that way, if the outcome is good, you can say it was just a stroke of luck. And if it's bad, you have the perfect excuse: I didn't have enough time. The most universal example is receiving praise. Someone tells you what incredible work you've done. And instead of feeling proud, you feel a spike of anxiety and think, if they only knew the truth, if they knew how little I really know, they wouldn't say that. And a third basic fact about this feeling is that it doesn't just generate a fear of failure, which is logical. It also, and this is key, generates a deep fear of success. Because every new accomplishment raises expectations, puts you more in the spotlight, and increases the terror that your supposed fraud will finally be exposed. This concept didn't just appear out of nowhere, it has a very specific origin. In the late 1970s, 2 psychologists noticed a very strange pattern. Their names were Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. They were studying a group of high-achieving women, both academically and professionally. And time and again, these women, who were objectively the elite in their fields, privately confessed to feeling like imposters. Despite their doctorates and successes, they lived with the constant fear of being discovered. It was they who gave this experience a name. Everything we've just covered, the name, attributing success to luck, the fear of success, that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's what most people know and what you can find with a quick internet search. But if this is what we see on the surface, what secret engines are driving it from beneath? Welcome to level 2, the hidden mechanisms. And here comes the first big revelation. The imposter feeling, in most cases, has nothing to do with low self-esteem. Think about it for a second. You can feel like a valuable and loved person and still feel like a professional fraud. Why? Because the problem isn't how you value your being, but rather that you have a set of broken, unrealistic internal rules about what it means to be competent. Knowing this gives us a double-edged sword. On the opportunity side, you can start to see your work process differently. The fact that you need to research, draft, or even feel confused sometimes isn't proof of your fraud. It's proof that you're doing the real work. Competence isn't about knowing everything, it's a process of discovery. A programmer who spends days looking for a bug in their code isn't an imposter. They are quite literally a programmer working. Identifying your effort and struggle as part of the success process, and not as a sign of your incapacity, is the first step to defusing the bomb. Now, the risk side. The danger is falling into the trap of comparing your behind-the-scenes footage with others' finished films. You see someone's perfect speech, but you don't see the 100 hours of practice and panic that went into it. A clear example is when you see an incredible musician on stage and think they were born with that gift. You don't see the thousands of hours of lonely, frustrating practice. That unfair contrast between your messy reality and their polished outcome is the perfect fuel for the imposter feeling. Now let's talk about an invisible rule that governs this feeling, a rule that operates in our nervous system without us even realizing it. It's a process neuroscientists call neuroception. It's our brain's ability to detect threats in the environment long before our conscious mind becomes aware. And one of the greatest threats to a human being is social exclusion, being cast out of the group. So, when you're in an important meeting and you're afraid of saying something foolish, your primitive brain doesn't think, "I'll just look a little bad." It thinks danger of exile. The tribe might reject me. And it triggers a real and physical anxiety response, even though you logically know your life isn't on the line. It's an echo from our evolutionary past. Internally, this feeling is supported by a mental structure psychologists often call a cognitive bias. A cognitive bias is simply a mental shortcut, a predictable error in our reasoning. In this case, it's often connected to an inverted version of the famous Dunning-Kruger effect. People with little knowledge tend to overestimate their ability. But what studies from Cornell University found is that people with extensive knowledge tend to underestimate theirs. This is the factory defect in the expert's brain. Because something in your field comes relatively easy to you, you assume it must be easy for others too. You don't realize that your easy is someone else's extremely difficult, and that's why you feel you have no special merit. So how do we actively counteract this? With a very simple yet powerful mental strategy, keep an evidence log. It's not a feeling journal. It's a file of hard data. When someone sends you an email thanking you for your work, save it. When you solve a difficult problem, write it down. When you receive a positive review, file it away. When the voice of fraud appears, don't argue with it. Simply open the file and read the data. Treat the feeling as a hypothesis, and your log as the empirical evidence that disproves it. Let's think about how an ancient custom has shaped this. In ancestral tribes, roles were very clear. There was the best hunter, the best gatherer, the healer. Expertise was visible and specific. Today, we live in a world of ambiguous roles where we're expected to be flexible, constant learners, and good at many things at once. This ambiguity is a perfect breeding ground for doubt. The practical takeaway for today is this: change your goal. Instead of aspiring to be the expert, a static and fragile title, aspire to be a master learner. This identity gives you permission not to know everything, to ask questions, to make mistakes. It frees you from the pressure of omniscience. And if we have to extract the key takeaway from all of this for our real lives, it's this: the feeling that you are a fraud is usually not an indicator of your lack of ability. The general rule, and this is almost a paradox, is that it's a byproduct of your awareness, your intelligence, and your desire to do things well. True imposters don't have this problem because they aren't even aware of their incompetence. So next time that feeling hits you, instead of accepting it as truth, pause and reframe it. Say to yourself, there it is. That feeling, it's a sign that I'm stepping out of my comfort zone and that I deeply care about the quality of my work. Understanding these mechanisms strips the feeling of immense power. It's no longer a truth about your soul, it's a predictable pattern in your brain. And what's predictable is manageable. But if you thought we had it all figured out, get ready, because here the story gets truly messy. Welcome to Level 3, the chaos of reality, debates, and complexities. And the first major controversy is imposter syndrome a useful psychological concept, or just a trendy label that puts a fancy name on lifelong insecurity? On one hand, there are critics who say it pathologizes a normal human experience, meaning it turns simple self-doubt into a kind of medical condition, making people feel broken. On the other hand, defenders argue that giving it a name allows millions of people to identify a destructive pattern in their lives they couldn't describe before, and that's the first step to addressing it. What's at stake in this debate is fundamental. Do we treat it as a personal flaw that's cured with a simple "just believe in yourself more"? Or do we see it as a logical response to toxic, overly critical work or academic environments that foster self-doubt? And this leads us to challenge a deeply ingrained popular belief, the idea that this is a form of humility. This is a myth we need to debunk. It is not humility. True humility is having an accurate perception of your strengths and weaknesses. Imposter feeling, on the contrary, is a systematic distortion of reality, where you ignore your strengths and magnify your weaknesses to an infinite degree. So why do we love to believe this myth? Because it allows us to mask our anxiety with a layer of virtue. It sounds much nobler and more acceptable to say I struggle with imposter syndrome than to admit I'm terrified people will think I'm stupid. And here lies one of the cruelest paradoxes of this topic. Often, the more success you have, the worse the feeling gets. Every achievement, every promotion, instead of alleviating the feeling, intensifies it. Why? Because it raises the bar, increases expectations, and gives you the sense that the fall, when they finally discover you, will be much more painful. This leaves us with an almost philosophical dilemma without an easy solution. Where is the thin line that separates healthy self-criticism, which is the engine of improvement, from the paralyzing self-flagellation of the imposter feeling? No one has a rule to measure it. Let's adopt for a moment a critical viewpoint that's gaining a lot of traction in recent years. The ethical objection to how we talk about this topic is that for decades, we've placed all the burden on the individual. We say, you have imposter syndrome, especially to women and people from minority groups. But what if the problem isn't in their head? What if they're feeling real insecurity because they're in an environment that constantly sends them signals that they don't belong there? Even the word syndrome is controversial. A syndrome is a medical term, a set of symptoms pointing to a disease. However, imposter feeling is not recognized as an official mental disorder in psychiatric diagnostic manuals. The debate has changed over time. When the researchers we mentioned at the beginning described it, they focused on high-achieving women. Today we know it affects people of all genders. But the more modern conversation is no longer about who feels it, but about how our work and educational cultures create and perpetuate it. Ultimately, this feeling connects with something fundamental to the human condition, our desperate need to belong and our most primitive fear of rejection and social exile. And it presents us with a problem as a species that we haven't yet solved. How do we build families, schools, and companies that value the learning process, effort, and vulnerability above the appearance of effortless confidence and genius? So as you can see, the topic is a real tangle. It's a personal feeling, a cultural debate, a business management problem, and a dilemma about the nature of trust and competence. You've survived the chaos. Now it's time to see the details that separate the curious from the true connoisseurs. Welcome to Level 4, Expert Knowledge, the Niche Secrets. And the first concept you won't easily find is attributional style. It's the consistent way you explain to yourself why things happen. People prone to the imposter feeling have a very specific and pessimistic pattern. When they succeed, they attribute it to external causes. I was lucky. Unstable ones, it was just this once, and specific ones, only in this task. But when they fail, they attribute it to internal causes. I'm stupid. Stable ones, I'll always be this way. And global ones, I fail at everything in my life. The analogy is this. Imagine you're the judge in the trial of your own life. When you win a case, you shout, "Fixed!" The evidence was faked, the jury was bought. But when you lose, you bang the gavel and sentence guilty on all counts. Life in prison with no chance of parole. It's a rigged trial from the start. Now, let's talk about a key figure in this field whose work has been immensely influential, but is less known than the original pioneers, Dr. Valerie Young. She's a secret hero in this story. She dedicated her career to researching the phenomenon and went beyond the simple definition. She discovered that the imposter feeling manifests in different ways, and she classified them into 5 types: the perfectionist, the superhuman, the natural genius, the soloist, and the expert. This was a gigantic leap because suddenly people could identify not just that they felt this way, but what their particular flavor of fraud was. But there's an alternative, much more rebellious theory. This unconventional perspective suggests that the imposter feeling isn't a cognitive distortion, but a very accurate emotional and social perception of a world that, let's be honest, is often hyper-competitive, arbitrary, and superficially critical. From this point of view, the feeling isn't the problem, it's a symptom of a sick system. And now, a detail from scientific research that directly clashes with common sense. Some studies suggest that as you become a true expert in a field, the imposter feeling can worsen, not improve. This clashes with our intuition because we assume more knowledge equals more confidence. But what actually happens is that true knowledge opens your eyes to the vastness of all that you don't know. A beginner doesn't know what they don't know, but an expert is painfully aware of the limits of human knowledge, and that awareness can easily be misinterpreted by our brain as proof of our own ignorance. Now let's bring together several ideas we've discussed. Let's connect that attributional style we talked about with the natural genius type Dr. Young described. And here's the aha moment. The natural genius is the person who believes that real competence means everything should come easily and flawlessly on the first try. So the moment they encounter a normal learning difficulty, their pessimistic attributional style kicks in and their internal judge shouts, "I knew it! If I were a real genius, this would be easy. I'm a fraud!" It's a system, a self-reinforcing loop. Seeing it as a system gives you power. You're no longer a victim of a mysterious feeling. You're the technician who can analyze a mechanism and decide which piece to adjust, the initial belief, the internal dialogue, or the final interpretation of the result. From here, we enter uncharted territory. Do you dare to look towards the final frontier? Welcome to Level 5, the final frontier, speculation, and awe. And the first futuristic idea is this. What if technology could give us an objective, real-time measure of our competence for a specific task? Imagine that in 100 years before giving a talk, a neural interface showed you that you possess 92% of the relevant knowledge. The feeling of not being enough could become as obsolete as the fear that our ship will fall off the edge of the Earth is today. The subjective opinion of your anxious brain would lose all its power against objective data. This leads us to the fundamental question where current science clashes with its own limits. If your actions in the world consistently produce good results, but your internal feeling is one of being a fraud, which of the two is the true reality? Science can measure your results, but it can't tell you how to live your feelings. This is where philosophy takes over. Schools of thought like existentialism would tell you that your essence isn't in your anxious thoughts, but in your actions. You are what you do, not what you feel you are. And the most dizzying philosophical implication is this. Perhaps that critical voice in your head that believes it's you actually isn't. Perhaps it's just a program, an echo from the past. And the real you is the consciousness that observes that voice. This means you don't have to defeat the voice or silence it. You just have to stop believing it owns the show. All of this connects directly to the future of humanity. As we face global problems that require bold and coordinated action, our ability to act despite uncertainty and internal doubt is crucial. Overcoming this kind of collective imposter syndrome as a species could be the key to daring to implement the solutions we already know are necessary. And here's the last idea, the most provocative statement of this journey. The feeling of being a fraud isn't a defect in your system. It's an inevitable feature of a mind advanced enough to be self-aware and conscious of its own limitations. Therefore, the ultimate goal might not be to eliminate the feeling forever. Perhaps the goal is to develop the wisdom to create, lead, love, and live a full life while that voice is in the background. To see it not as proof of your inadequacy, but as proof that you're playing a game you truly care about. And with that final thought, our descent through the 5 levels has ended. Take a second, breathe, and contemplate the incredible landscape of knowledge we've traversed together. Remember where we started. At the beginning of this video, we talked about that simple, familiar feeling of getting a job and thinking you don't deserve it. At that moment, it seemed like just a confidence issue, something personal and annoying. And now look where we've arrived, at the idea that this very feeling is a characteristic of consciousness connected to our evolutionary past, shaped by our culture, and whose management is key to our collective future. We've transformed simple self-doubt into a complex psychological system, a profound social debate, and finally, a powerful philosophical tool. It's been an incredible transformation. What idea from this entire journey impacted you the most personally? What piece of the puzzle clicked into place for your own experience? I truly want to thank you for your time, your attention, and your courage to explore these ideas. Share that reflection you had in the comments. Reading your experiences and how you connect these ideas to your life is, without a doubt, the most enriching part of this channel. If these deep dives into ideas fascinate you, subscribe so we can see you on the next expedition. And if you think someone in your life needs to hear this message, share the video with them. It could be the map they were looking for. Keep questioning, keep exploring, because the most fascinating answer is always hidden in the next layer of the question. And now, go out there and dare to do that thing you think you're a fraud for.